I never expected anything different from the Whitmores, but the envelope still made my breath pause. Heavy cardstock. Gold-foiled edges. Family only, it read, tucked neatly below my parents' names and an elegant cursive flourish announcing their 45th wedding anniversary. I held it in my hands for a full minute before opening it, not out of anticipation, but preparation. The tea kettle hissed gently behind me, steam curling through the air like a slow exhale. My apartment smelled of cinnamon and clove, a warm contrast to the sharpness of Connecticut's November chill that still clung to my coat. I set the envelope on the kitchen table beside an unfinished sketch, a reading nook I'd been designing for a couple in New Haven, and turned the stove off. The whistling stopped. Silence settled in. Across the room, on the bottom shelf of my bookcase, was a shoebox labeled Claire, not sent. Inside were years of things that never earned a response. My college acceptance letter, the invite to my first gallery showing, a get-well card I never sent when Dad had knee surgery. On top, as always, sat the laminated flyer from my 2012 showcase. My name had been printed in bold serif type. My parents RSVP'd yes. They never came. Carol, my neighbor at the time, drove 2 hours to be there. She brought cookies and took 3 photos with her iPad. I slid the invitation next to the flyer and reached for my tea. The warmth of the cup grounded me, but the memories still burned. I hadn't expected them to remember. I just didn't think they'd keep forgetting with such ceremony. My phone buzzed. Aunt May, the only family member who ever called just to see how I was doing. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft like worn linen. "I imagine you got the envelope." "I did," I said, setting my tea down. "Gold foil and everything." There was a pause. "We'd love to see you," she added, and that was all. No pressure. Just presence. It's how she's always been. "I know," I whispered. After we hung up, I stayed at the window for a while, watching the streetlights blink on. Somewhere out there, my parents were preparing table centerpieces and guest lists, probably ordering filet mignon and reminiscing about Vanessa's high school debate titles. I hadn't heard from them directly in months, maybe a forwarded email about the event, but no call, no check-in. Not even a note. Just that gold-edged invitation addressed to Claire Whitmore, like I was a colleague instead of a daughter. I turned back to the table, where the corners of the envelope had begun to curl slightly from the humidity of the tea. I opened a nearby drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, a certified check for $65,000. Years of freelance design work, odd jobs, consultations, carefully saved, steadily earned. This wasn't charity. It wasn't reconciliation. It was proof. Not just of effort, but of being real, of having lived, worked, contributed. I had once believed that if I built enough, achieved enough, they'd see me. I no longer needed that. But I still wanted to place something on that table, something undeniable. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and sealed with intention. I placed it carefully in my purse, zipped the compartment, and sat still for a beat. The only sound was the low hum of my radiator and the clink of the teaspoon against ceramic. I took one last sip, stood up, and grabbed my coat. At the door, I looked around my space, the shelves I built by hand, the cozy throw May had crocheted, the mismatched mugs I loved too much to replace. I whispered aloud, "This time, I don't leave empty." Then I stepped outside into the cold November air. The wind nipped at my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. I walked into the night not with expectation, but with resolve, carrying silence, and something that just might break it. The restaurant's name was carved in brass on a slate gray awning, Villette. Sleek, understated, expensive. The valet smiled as he opened the door for the red Lexus ahead of me. Vanessa's. I recognized the car immediately. The lacquered shine, the custom license plate with her initials, subtle but deliberate. When I pulled up in my 10-year-old Corolla, the valet barely looked at me. No nod, no comment. Just held out his hand for the keys like he'd been handed a grocery list. Inside, the restaurant glowed gold. Light dripped from glass chandeliers. The scent of saffron and seared duck hung in the air. People laughed softly over clinking glassware, and waiters in tailored vests glided like ghosts between tables. I caught my reflection in the mirror-lined entrance, plain black dress, scuffed boots, a loose strand of hair I'd missed when tying it back. I adjusted nothing, let them see what they always overlooked. The maitre d' offered a smile practiced enough to pass as sincere. "Whitmore party?" he asked, eyes flicking to the heel of my boot before settling back on my face. "Yes," I said, steady. He nodded. "Your sister mentioned you might be joining us." Might. I followed him to a private dining area, curtained off, of course, because appearances matter, and immediately spotted Vanessa. She stood near our parents, radiant in a crimson-wrapped dress that clung just enough to make a statement. Her laugh rang out above the low hum of conversation. The kind of laugh that made people turn, notice, lean in. That laugh was a tool she'd mastered early. When we were kids, she'd laugh just before asking for my birthday wish list, only to tell Mom and Dad it was all junk. Then she'd get the earrings I circled in the catalog. I didn't expect her to acknowledge me when I walked in, and she didn't. She kept talking to a cousin's new wife, her hand gesturing as if she were mid-campaign pitch. My mother adjusted a vase on the table, her signature pearls catching the light. My father sipped from a crystal glass and barely glanced my way. My name card was tucked at the far end of the long table, slightly askew. No one noticed as I took my seat. The cushion was too plush, and I sank half an inch lower than the rest. Fitting. Dinner unfolded in waves. Lobster bisque served in tiny porcelain cups. Roasted duck with cherry glaze. Truffle risotto. Every detail meticulously planned. Every garnish shaped for Instagram. My parents smiled the whole time. Vanessa led conversations with the skill of someone used to commanding boardrooms. I added nothing, not because I had nothing to say, but because no one asked. I kept one hand resting lightly on the envelope in my purse. It grounded me. Its weight was subtle but real. Proof of the years they never saw. Halfway through dessert, some sponge sugar sculpture that looked more like art than food, Vanessa rose, champagne flute in hand. "If I could have everyone's attention," she said, her voice bright and warm, "I'd like to propose a toast." The room quieted. Chairs shifted. My mother beamed. "To Helen and Richard," Vanessa began, "for raising the most extraordinary, accomplished, loving." She paused, dramatic as ever. Only daughter of family could ask for. Polite laughter. Glasses raised. Forks tapped plates. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a cloth napkin. No one turned to me. Not even a glance. The words hung in the air like fog, cloying and heavy. I felt it settle on my shoulders, in my throat, behind my eyes. But I didn't cry. I didn't speak. Instead, I looked down at my plate and saw my own reflection in the silver fork. Distorted. Bent. Half-formed. The conversation picked back up around me like I had never existed. The waiter cleared my plate even though I hadn't finished. I let him. Then a voice beside me, young, unfamiliar. "A cousin's new boyfriend, maybe?" "Sorry, are you part of the Whitmore family too?" I turned. He looked genuinely curious, not malicious. Just someone trying to make polite conversation. I nodded once. Apparently not the only daughter. His smile faltered. He glanced at Vanessa and turned back to his drink. My hand returned to the envelope. I could feel the corner of the seal through the lining of my purse. I traced it slowly, the weight of years pressing back. Gallery nights, first jobs, late nights sketching kitchens and children's playrooms, never once mentioned in family newsletters. I looked across the table. May and Gerald sat quietly near the end, not far from me. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. May's eyes caught mine for half a second and softened, and I knew. Without ceremony, I pushed back my chair. The legs scraped the polished floor louder than expected. Conversation paused again. My mother glanced up. My father checked his watch. Vanessa sipped her wine. I walked the length of the table slowly. My heels didn't echo, they whispered. I didn't touch the mic on its stand. I didn't need to, not yet. Instead, I walked past it. Past the family that hadn't made space for me. Past the sister who believed she was the headline. Toward the only two people who had ever looked at me with real pride. May straightened. Gerald blinked. I pulled the envelope from my purse, laid it gently on the table in front of them. "This is for you," I said softly. The room froze. Forks hovered. Laughter stalled mid-breath. Vanessa's glass paused at her lips. May touched the envelope with trembling fingers. Gerald's hand came to rest on top of hers. They didn't say thank you. They didn't need to. I turned, walked back toward the entrance, past the stunned faces, past the golden chandeliers. I didn't look for a reaction. That wasn't the point. Outside, the air cut colder than before. But it didn't sting. It woke me. The valet opened Vanessa's door like he was welcoming royalty. He greeted her by name, even joked about her being early. I watched from behind the wheel of my 10-year-old Corolla, engine rattling softly as I pulled in. The valet barely looked at me. No small talk, no enjoy your evening. Just a quick flick of his hand for the keys. The difference between us had always been that simple. Not about what we owned, but what people assumed we deserved. I stepped into Valette, and the air shifted. Gold light spilled from chandeliers like syrup. Everything gleamed. Crystal glasses so delicate they looked like breath would shatter them. Silver-edged place cards, velvet curtains. A pianist played something subtle, the kind of music that filled a room without ever drawing attention. The maitre d' spotted me and straightened. His eyes dipped, just for a second, to the hem of my black dress and the worn toe of my boots. His smile was practiced, kind without warmth. "Whitmore party?" I nodded. "Your sister mentioned you might be joining us." Might. As if I were an afterthought to my own family celebration. He led me past tables full of quiet laughter and soft linen napkins folded like origami. At the back, behind a frosted glass divider, the Whitmore party had taken over a private room. Of course they had. Visibility with exclusivity, the Whitmore specialty. Vanessa was already standing, radiant in a deep crimson dress that shimmered just enough. She was talking to someone. A second cousin's wife, maybe, her voice bright and pitched to travel. My parents sat near her, Richard with his usual neat bourbon, Helen with her pearl necklace twisted perfectly. The same set she wore to Vanessa's product launch. No one turned when I entered. No smiles. No nods. Just the slight shift of chairs as the waiter served scallops on tiny ceramic spoons. My place card was at the far end of the table, slightly off-center. I bent to straighten it before I sat. The cushion was firmer than expected. It made my back straighten automatically. Dinner unfolded around me in waves. The wine flowed. The courses arrived in rehearsed rhythm. Foie gras, truffle risotto, sea bass with lemon foam. Everything plated like it belonged in a magazine spread. Conversation spun like a carousel, always moving, always glittering, and never meant for me. I offered one comment about a gallery I'd consulted on in Boston. My mother blinked, then asked Vanessa whether her new marketing client was that hot wellness app she'd posted about. The pivot was seamless. My words fell flat in the air and vanished. I stopped trying. Instead, I watched. My father's hand movements as he explained his favorite golf course to someone's husband. My mother's polite laugh. The way Vanessa touched her own wrist lightly when talking, an old tic from childhood. I used to do it too. Then I stopped. As dessert was served, some architectural creation of sponge sugar, pistachio mousse, and raspberry dust, Vanessa stood. "If I may," she said, lifting her champagne flute. The room hushed. Phones went away. Even the waiter paused near the door. "I'd like to make a quick toast," Vanessa smiled. "To Richard and Helen, for 45 years of marriage. For raising the most extraordinary, accomplished, loving." She paused just long enough. Only daughter of family could hope for. Laughter. Applause. A few soft gasps that sounded like delight. My mother touched her heart. My father raised his glass. No one said a word about the glaring light echoing across the table. My eyes drifted to my untouched drink. The flute was cold, condensation clinging to the glass. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I slipped my hand under the table, fingers finding the envelope in my purse. I didn't feel shame. Not anger either. Just weight. The kind that settles behind your ribs and makes your posture sag if you're not careful. A soft voice pulled me back. "Sorry," someone said beside me. A young man, maybe early 30s, wearing a suit a little too stiff to be truly comfortable. "Are you part of the Whitmore family too?" I turned to him. He looked genuinely curious, no edge in his tone. I studied his face for a second, open, expectant, and offered a thin smile. "Depends who you ask." He blinked, unsure if I was joking. I didn't clarify. I turned back to my plate. From the corner of my eye, I saw May across the room. Her eyes met mine briefly, her expression steady. Gerald placed a quiet hand over hers. The room buzzed again. People resumed eating. Vanessa launched into a story about her campaign reaching 1 million impressions in 48 hours. My mother asked if it would be on a billboard near the harbor. My father laughed like he was already proud of it. I glanced again at the envelope. Still sealed. Still heavy with years they never noticed. I thought about Dad's words once, during a family photo shoot when I was 15. Legacy is about presentation. He'd said it to Vanessa as the photographer adjusted lighting, reminding her to smile with teeth. I had been there too. But in the final printed frame, I wasn't included. I didn't stand abruptly. I didn't slam my chair back. I simply moved. Quietly, I placed my napkin beside my untouched dessert, smoothed the front of my dress, and stood. The velvet of my purse strap slid over my shoulder like a ribbon falling loose. One by one, the voices dipped. The tension didn't spike, it dimmed. Like the light when a cloud passes in front of the sun. I walked the length of the table, not rushed, not performative, just present. As I passed Vanessa, her voice caught for a half second. Her eyes followed me, then narrowed slightly as if trying to read a cue she hadn't rehearsed for. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't need to. I walked past the mic, past the performance, toward the only part of the room that had ever felt real. My father lifted his glass like he was accepting an award, eyes twinkling, lips curved into the smile he reserved for rooms full of witnesses. All around him, the guests leaned in, drawn by the weight of legacy, of ceremony, of a family that knew how to stage perfection. Vanessa had just sat down, cheeks flushed with praise, her empty champagne flute now a trophy beside her plate. I stood behind them, still holding the silence they left me in. Once, when I was 17, I had an emergency appendectomy. I wrote my parents' names as next of kin. The hospital called them 3 times. No one came. Aunt May stayed overnight, holding my hand through nausea and morphine. That memory landed heavy in my chest now, not bitter, just present. Like a stone in a river, smooth from time, but still unmoved. I walked to the microphone at the head of the room. No one had called for a second speech. There wasn't supposed to be one. But I didn't need permission to speak. I reached the mic and cleared my throat gently. It was amazing, really, how fast a room could go still. Conversations dropped like loose silverware. Laughter strangled mid-chuckle. All 40-something faces turned, some curious, some wary, some confused. I let the silence breathe for a moment. Then I spoke. "You have 2 daughters," I said, voice clear, hands steady at my sides. "One you praise, one you've ignored." A few murmurs stirred like wind under a door. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Her jaw flexed, but she said nothing. I didn't look at her. I looked beyond, into the space where truth hovered, where memory refused to be erased. When I was 10, I began. My parents missed my art showcase because Vanessa had a tennis match. They said they'd catch the next one. There wasn't a next one. I paused. Let it land. When I was 17, I had an emergency appendectomy. I gave the hospital their numbers. They never answered. Aunt May stayed with me all night. She brought crossword puzzles. She rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. No one moved. Even the pianist had stopped playing. I sent invitations to my first solo exhibit in 2012. I printed flyers. Wrote a note that said I did it. It sat on the kitchen counter for 2 days. Then it disappeared. My father was still, but I could see his knuckles whitening around the base of his glass. I've spent years asking myself if I was just forgettable, or inconvenient, or not enough. But that's not why I'm standing here. I looked to the back of the room. May sat straight-backed, Gerald's hand resting gently on hers. They weren't surprised, not afraid, just present. "I came here tonight not to be seen," I said. "I came to end the silence." I walked toward them, slow, deliberate. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor, the only sound in a room full of breath held tight. When I reached their table, I pulled the thick envelope from my purse and laid it carefully in front of May. "This was never for them," I said, my voice softer now. "It was always for you. Because you showed up." May's fingers trembled as she touched the envelope, the seal unbroken, the paper cream-colored and heavy with meaning. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know," I replied. I stood for a moment, letting the quiet settle like fresh snow. Then I turned. As I walked past Vanessa, my hand brushed her shoulder lightly, accidental or intentional, I wasn't sure. She turned slightly, eyes wide and searching, but I didn't stop. I didn't give her the ending she probably rehearsed. I didn't look at my mother, who had gone pale. I didn't look at my father, still gripping his drink like it was the only thing anchoring him. As I neared the entrance, the maitre d' appeared, as if summoned by the shift in gravity. He opened the door without a word, his expression unreadable. I stepped into the threshold, the air cooler on this side of the curtain, the music now faint, distant, irrelevant. Behind me, the room was still frozen. Not in shock, but in truth. I didn't turn around. The first voicemail didn't shout. It didn't plead. It just delivered. You embarrassed this family, my father said. No greeting. No sign-off. Just four clipped words like a memo left on a desk. I stared at my phone, the screen still glowing in the darkness, time-stamped 10:41 p.m., barely half an hour after I walked out of the restaurant. I sat on the floor of my apartment, back against the couch, legs curled underneath me. The tea kettle hissed softly in the kitchen, steam curling toward the ceiling in slow spirals. I hadn't bothered with lights. Just one candle flickered on the windowsill, and soft jazz spilled from the speaker, low enough that I could still hear the clock ticking. The second voicemail buzzed in. This time, it was my mother. 2.5 minutes. Claire, how could you? In front of everyone. After everything we've done. This was supposed to be a celebration, and you. I pressed delete before she could finish. My thumb hovered over the voicemail icon. There were 15 more. Unplayed. My inbox blinked red like an alarm. I didn't press play. I didn't need to. I already knew the scripts. Shock. Shame. Self-pity disguised as concern. Maybe even the occasional guilt sandwich. 2 slices of "we love you" pressed around a thick layer of "why are you like this?" Instead, I got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured water over a bag of chamomile. The aroma rose immediately, soft, steady, grounding. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text. From Vanessa. It was a screenshot. A message I'd sent to May almost 3 years ago, late at night after a panic attack that left me gasping on my bedroom floor. Sometimes I want to scream until they finally remember I exist. I had written. Vanessa's caption. Clearly you've been unstable for a while. We're all very concerned. I stared at it for a moment. Not in shock. Just quiet recognition. Then I blocked her. No message. No reaction. Just silence. I opened my settings and blocked my parents next. The phone didn't buzz again. I curled up on the couch, wrapped in the old knit blanket May gave me for my 28th birthday. My tea sat on the end table, steaming gently. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat, listening to the tiny domestic orchestra around me, the clink of the spoon against porcelain, the whistle of wind against the window, the soft rhythm of the jazz piano. This was family. The kind that held you without touching you. The kind you built for yourself. The phone rang. Just once. May. I answered on the second ring. Sweetheart, she said, her voice a soft balm. We haven't opened it yet. Are you sure? I looked around my space. The shelf of design books. The candlelight dancing on the mug. My own heartbeat. Yes, I said. You saw me. That's all it was ever for. There was a pause, then a rustle paper, Gerald's voice faint in the background. Oh my lord, he muttered. This is, May's voice trembled slightly. Claire, this is $65,000. You already earned it, I said. Every birthday card you remembered. Every call. Every time you showed up when no one else did. She didn't speak for a few seconds. Then a breath, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. We always saw you, sweetheart. I know. We stayed on the line a few minutes more. Nothing important exchanged, and yet everything that mattered passed between us. After we hung up, I stood, walked to the bookshelf, ran my fingers along the frames tucked between potted ivy and design magazines. The one of my mother smiling in pearls, the post-Christmas card. My father at my college graduation, not the real one, the staged one we redid for a social media post after they missed the real ceremony. One by one, I took them down. I wrapped each frame in old newspaper. No malice. No urgency. Just Closing a chapter. The silence in the room wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, like breath after a long dive. I took a sip of my tea. Still warm. Still mine. I heard the soft hum of the Lexus engine first, then the doors shutting in perfect sync. When I looked through the peephole, my parents stood like two statues still, dressed too formally for a Saturday morning, holding a manila folder between them like it was a peace offering or a lawsuit. When affection fails, some parents show up with folders. I opened the door before they rang the bell. "You can come in," I said, blocking the rest of the hallway. "But I have a client meeting at 3. It was 2:06. A lie, but necessary. My apartment was already warm from the fireplace. I had a pine-scented candle burning on the mantel, and the bookshelf glowed with fairy lights. Their coats looked stiff in the softness of the room. My mother's pearl earrings caught the firelight. My father's shoes left tiny flecks of salt on the rug. They didn't sit right away. They looked around as if they were appraising the space, not visiting their daughter. "We brought some things you might want to see," my father said, lifting the folder like an exhibit. I sat on the edge of the armchair, one hand wrapped around a cooling mug of peppermint tea. He spread the contents on the coffee table slowly. Photos. School awards. A faded art ribbon from 2nd grade. A birthday card with a cartoon penguin. My name written in sharp cursive. "We were there," he said. "You just don't remember." I reached into the drawer beside the couch and pulled out an old paper calendar. The cover was curled at the corners, edges worn from being opened and closed too many times. I flipped it to May 2010, pointed at a date marked in blue ink. "First solo exhibit. RSVP, yes." "You didn't come," I said, gently but without hesitation. "Carol did. She drove 4 hours after work. She took the only 3 photos I have from that night." My mother looked down, blinking fast. Her hands were folded tight in her lap. "We had commitments," my father said, voice tight. "Vanessa." "Always Vanessa," I interrupted. "Not sharp, just done." My mother's face crumpled. A single tear slipped down, perfectly placed. Like a scene rehearsed. "I wasn't difficult," I said. "I was just not her." She reached out slightly, fingers fluttering like she might touch mine. I didn't move. The space between us stayed still. "We can fix this," she whispered. "We can go to counseling." "Vanessa agrees." "Vanessa isn't welcome in this conversation," I said. "Not anymore." My father shifted. His mouth opened, then closed again. "I wrote papers in this room," I said, my voice even. "I designed hospitals and nurseries and shelters in this room. I built a life here without applause, without acknowledgement. And I'm proud of that." My mother began to cry in earnest now. Real tears. "Maybe?" I didn't check. My father stood abruptly, tension radiating off his shoulders. "We raised you," he said, as if it were a trump card. "No," I replied. "You raised Vanessa. I raised myself." Silence fell again, thick but not suffocating. Just honest. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. "I wish you peace," I said. "But I need space." They didn't move right away. Then my mother brushed past me, her perfume trailing behind like memory. My father followed, the folder tucked back under his arm like nothing had changed. But everything had. I closed the door gently and stood there, breathing in the quiet. The tea on the table was cold now. I picked it up anyway and took a sip. It wasn't sweet, but it tasted like truth. It was a gray February afternoon, the kind that held the hush of snow before it fell.